The studio lights burned brighter than usual that morning, almost blinding, almost warning. Something was off. You could feel it before a single word was spoken. The cameras rolled, the music faded, and the audience erupted into applause as Leonardo DiCaprio walked onto the stage. Calm, composed. That familiar, effortless charm was there. But today, it didn't feel the same. There was a weight behind his smile, a silence behind his eyes. And right before we step into what happened next, make sure you subscribe to Talk Battles, hit that like button, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this moment, it didn't just surprise people. It divided them. Across the table, Whoopi Goldberg watched him closely. Decades of experience had taught her how to read a room. And right now, the room was telling her one thing. This wasn't going to be a normal interview. "You've been everywhere lately," Whoopi began, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "New projects, new campaigns, you don't slow down, do you?" Leonardo took his seat, nodding politely. "I try not to. There's too much happening in the world to sit still." The audience responded with light applause, but it felt restrained, like they were waiting for something more. Sunny Hostin leaned forward, smiling. "You've been especially vocal recently. Climate, global issues, awareness campaigns. What's driving that right now?" Leonardo folded his hands, thinking for a moment. "Perspective," he said. "There comes a point where you can't ignore what you're seeing anymore." His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something serious. Whoopi tilted her head slightly. "But you've had that platform for a long time. Why does it feel like you're pushing harder now than ever before?" A simple question, but not an easy one. Leonardo's smile faded just a little. "Because the stakes are higher now," he replied. "And because I think we've run out of time for passive conversations." A quiet murmur passed through the audience. That line landed. Whoopi didn't miss it. "And yet," she said, leaning back in her chair, "a lot of people feel like those conversations still stay in the same circles." The first shift. Subtle but real. Leonardo glanced at her, his expression tightening just slightly. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," Whoopi continued, her tone steady, "you're speaking to people who already agree with you. Conferences, events, platforms that echo the same message." The audience reacted, soft murmurs, a few nods. "And you think that limits the impact?" Leonardo asked. "I think it raises the question," Whoopi replied, "of how much is actually changing." There it was. The first spark. Leonardo leaned back slightly, his fingers interlocking again. But this time, it wasn't relaxed. "Change doesn't always look dramatic," he said. "Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's behind the scenes." Joy Behar chuckled lightly, trying to soften the moment. "Well, slow doesn't exactly make headlines, does it?" A few laughs broke out, but they didn't last long, because Whoopi leaned forward again. "No," she said, "but visibility does." The room quieted. Leonardo met her gaze now fully. "And what's more important?" he asked. "Visibility or results?" A pause. Whoopi didn't answer immediately. She studied him. "Depends," she said finally. "Are there results people can actually see?" The tension crept in. Not loud, not explosive, but undeniable. Sunny stepped in gently. "I think what people are curious about is the real-world impact. Beyond awareness, what changes have you seen from your work?" Leonardo nodded slowly. "I've seen communities gain support, projects get funded, policies start conversations." "Start conversations," Whoopi repeated, cutting in. That interruption subtle, but sharp. Leonardo paused. "Yes," he said. "That's where change begins." "Or where it stays," Whoopi replied. A ripple of reaction swept through the audience. Now it was building. Leonardo's posture shifted, just slightly forward. "And what would you have it be?" he asked. Whoopi didn't hesitate. "Action," she said. "Visible, undeniable action." The word hung in the air. Action. Leonardo nodded once, slowly. "I agree," he said. "But action isn't always a performance." The audience reacted, some clapping, some murmuring. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "But performance is what people see." "And that's the problem," Leonardo replied, his voice firmer now. "We judge impact based on what's visible, not what's real." The tension snapped tighter. Joy glanced between them. "Okay, we're getting into something now." But neither of them looked away. Whoopi leaned forward again, her voice dropping slightly. "Or maybe," she said, "people are just tired of hearing words without seeing enough follow-through." A collective gasp. There it was. The moment everything shifted. Leonardo didn't react immediately, but his expression changed. Not dramatically, Just enough. Enough for everyone to notice. You think that's what I'm doing? He asked quietly. Whoopi held his gaze. I think that's what some people see. The audience went still. Because now, it wasn't general anymore. It was personal. Leonardo exhaled slowly, his composure still intact, but the calm now carried weight. Then maybe, he said, we should talk about what they don't see. And just like that, the interview crossed a line. From polite conversation to something far more real. The audience leaned in. The hosts went still. And the man who had spent years controlling his public image was about to step into a conversation he couldn't control anymore. The tension didn't fade, it deepened. You could feel it in the way the audience sat a little straighter now, in the way the applause had grown hesitant, uncertain, like no one quite knew whose side they were on anymore. Leonardo DiCaprio rested his hands together, but this time there was no casual ease in the gesture. It felt controlled, measured, like he was holding something back, or preparing to say something that would change the tone entirely. Whoopi Goldberg watched him closely, her expression calm on the surface, but her eyes were searching. Testing. Waiting. You said it's a balance, she repeated, her voice steady but deliberate. Between using the system and being used by it. Leonardo nodded slightly. Yes. Whoopi leaned forward just enough to shift the energy again. So tell me honestly, when was the last time you felt like you lost that balance? The audience went quiet. That question didn't sound like a headline. It sounded personal. Leonardo hesitated. Not for show this time. For real. There have been moments, he admitted slowly, where I've questioned if I'm doing enough or if I'm just part of the noise. A murmur spread through the crowd. This wasn't the polished answer they expected. Whoopi didn't interrupt. She let the silence stretch. And, she pressed softly, Leonardo inhaled deeply. And sometimes, I don't have a perfect answer. That honesty hit harder than any rehearsed statement. But Whoopi wasn't done. Because from the outside, she said, her tone sharpening again, it can look like a contradiction. You're speaking about urgency, about crisis, while still living in a world that contributes to it. There it was again. The push. This time, Leonardo didn't soften. This isn't about living perfectly, he said, his voice firmer now. It's about moving things forward. Whoopi tilted her head. Forward, or comfortably forward. A ripple of gasps. Joy Behar let out a quiet, okay, under her breath, sensing the edge getting sharper. Leonardo's eyes locked onto Whoopi's. Do you believe change only counts if it's extreme? He asked. I believe, Whoopi replied, that people listen more when actions match the urgency of the message. That line landed hard. The audience reacted, some clapping, some shifting uncomfortably. Leonardo leaned in now, mirroring her intensity. And I believe, he said, that dismissing efforts because they're not perfect slows everything down. Sonny Hostin glanced between them, clearly aware that this had gone far beyond a typical interview. But no one's dismissing effort, Sonny added carefully. I think the question is about scale, impact, accountability. Leonardo nodded. And I agree with that. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Do you? The room tightened again. Because accountability, she continued, means being open to criticism, especially when you're in a position of influence. Leonardo's jaw flexed slightly. I've never avoided criticism, he said. Not avoided, Whoopi replied, but sometimes deflected. That word hung in the air like a challenge. Leonardo didn't respond immediately. For a moment, he just looked at her. And then something shifted. Not anger. Not frustration. Something deeper. Let me ask you something, he said quietly. The audience leaned forward again. Whoopi didn't blink. Go ahead. Leonardo's voice remained calm, but there was a weight behind it now. Do you think conversations like this actually help move things forward? The question caught everyone off guard. Even Whoopi paused. I think honest conversations always matter, she said. Even if they turn into public doubt? Leonardo asked. Especially then. Another beat of silence. Leonardo nodded slowly. Because sometimes it feels like we spend more time questioning the messenger than addressing the message. A wave of mixed reactions rippled through the audience. Whoopi didn't back down. Or, she countered, we question the messenger because the message demands credibility. That line hit like a spark in dry air. Leonardo leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. And what defines credibility? He asked. Consistency, Whoopi answered instantly. Transparency. And yes, sacrifice. The word sacrifice echoed. Leonardo's expression changed again, this time more visibly. Sacrifice, he repeated. Yes, Whoopi said, because real change often requires giving something up. A long pause followed, and when Leonardo spoke again, his voice was quieter, but heavier. You think I haven't? The audience stilled. Whoopi held his gaze. I think people don't always see it. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. The tension was no longer just intellectual. It was emotional, personal. Sonny stepped in gently. Maybe this is also about perception. What people see versus what's actually happening behind the scenes. Leonardo nodded slightly, but his focus stayed on Whoopi. I've turned down projects, he said. Walked away from opportunities. Invested years into causes that don't bring headlines or profit. A few audience members clapped softly. But that's not what people remember, Whoopi replied. They remember what's visible, Leonardo said. And visibility shapes influence, Whoopi shot back. Another silence. Longer this time. The kind that makes everyone aware something important is unfolding. Joy shifted in her seat. This is intense, she muttered, half to herself. But no one laughed, because no one wanted to break the moment. Leonardo leaned forward again, his voice steady but unmistakably more direct. Then maybe the real issue isn't just what's being done, he said. It's what people choose to focus on. Whoopi's expression didn't change, but her tone did. And maybe, she replied, public figures don't get to choose that focus. That line landed like a final card on the table. The audience gasped, louder than before. Because now, it wasn't just a debate. It was a clash of perspectives neither side was willing to surrender. Leonardo held her gaze. For a second. 2 seconds. 3. And then, you're right, he said. The shift was immediate. Unexpected. The audience murmured in surprise. But before anyone could process it, he continued. We don't get to control the narrative, he said. But we do get to decide how we respond to it. Whoopi watched him carefully. And how are you responding? She asked. Leonardo didn't hesitate this time. By staying in the conversation, he said. Even when it's uncomfortable. A quiet reaction spread through the room. Because that answer felt real. But it didn't end the tension. If anything, it sharpened it. Whoopi leaned back slowly, her arms crossing again. Then let's stay uncomfortable, she said. And just like that, everyone knew. This wasn't cooling down. This was building towards something bigger. Something neither of them had fully said yet. But both were circling. Because beneath the talk of Hollywood, of climate, of influence, there was a deeper question forming. One that was no longer about the industry, or the audience, but about him. About who Leonardo DiCaprio really was. When the cameras stopped rolling, and as the studio lights continued to burn overhead, that question moved closer to the surface. Closer, and closer, until it was almost impossible to ignore. The air in the studio felt heavier now, like every word carried weight far beyond the stage. No one shifted in their seats anymore. No whispered reactions. No nervous laughter. Just silence, thick, focused, and waiting. Leonardo DiCaprio sat still, but the stillness didn't feel calm. It felt deliberate, like he was bracing himself for something deeper than criticism. Across from him, Whoopi Goldberg watched with the kind of focus that only comes from years of reading people. Not just their words, but the pauses between them. Let's stay uncomfortable, she had said. And now she meant it. You talk about staying in the conversation, Whoopi continued, her tone quieter now, but more precise. But staying in a conversation, and truly facing it, are two different things. Leonardo didn't respond immediately. This time, he didn't rush to answer. Because this wasn't about arguments anymore. This was about truth. What do you think I'm not facing? He asked finally. The question landed softly, but it carried an edge. Whoopi leaned forward slightly, her voice calm, almost reflective. I think, she said, you've spent a long time being seen as someone who cares, someone who speaks up, someone who stands for something bigger. A small ripple of agreement moved through the audience. But sometimes, she added, when people are placed on that kind of pedestal, they stop being questioned the way they should be. A pause. And I don't think you're used to that. A sharp intake of breath from the crowd. Leonardo's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in focus. You think I'm avoiding being questioned? He asked. I think, Whoopi replied carefully, you're used to admiration, not confrontation. That was it. The line that changed everything. The audience reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs, a few scattered claps, but quickly fell silent again, as if realizing they were witnessing something rare. Leonardo leaned back slightly, absorbing it. For a moment, he said nothing, and that silence spoke louder than anything so far. Sonny Hostin glanced at him, then at Whoopi, clearly aware that this had crossed into deeply personal territory. Leonardo, Sonny said gently, I don't think this is about attacking you. It's about understanding the gap between perception and reality. But Leonardo wasn't looking at Sonny. His gaze stayed fixed on Whoopi. You think I've had it easy? He asked quietly. Whoopi didn't flinch. I think you've had influence, she said. And influence changes how people respond to you. That's not what I asked. The tension snapped tighter. Whoopi's voice remained steady. No, it's not. But it's the question that matters. Another wave of murmurs. Leonardo exhaled slowly, his composure still intact. But the emotion underneath was no longer hidden. You're right about one thing, he said. I have been admired. I've had opportunities most people don't get. A few nods in the audience. But what people don't see, he continued, are the moments where you realize that admiration can become a barrier. Whoopi tilted her head slightly. A barrier to what? To being heard honestly, he said. That answer hung in the air. Because it wasn't defensive. It was revealing. When people already believe they know who you are, Leonardo added, they stop listening to what you're actually saying. The audience grew quieter. Even Whoopi's expression shifted, just slightly. And you think that's what's happening here? She asked. Leonardo held her gaze. I think, he said, you came into this conversation with a version of me already in mind. The audience reacted, soft gasps, whispers. Whoopi didn't deny it. We all do that, she said. It's human. But it shapes the conversation, Leonardo replied. And so does your image, Whoopi shot back. Another pause. But this time it felt different. Less like a clash. More like two perspectives colliding in real time. Leonardo leaned forward again, his voice quieter now, but more intense than ever. Then let's strip that away, he said. No image. No expectations. The room stilled. Just you and me, he added. Having an honest conversation. Whoopi watched him closely. All right, she said after a moment. Let's do that. The audience leaned in again. This felt like a turning point. But instead of easing the tension, it deepened it. Because now there was nowhere left to hide. No cameras, Leonardo said softly. No audience. Just a question. Whoopi nodded once. Go ahead. Leonardo didn't look away. Do you believe, he asked, that people can genuinely try to make a difference, even if they're not perfect at it? The question wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't defensive. It was real. And for the first time, Whoopi paused longer than usual. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The audience didn't move. Because this answer mattered. Finally, Whoopi spoke. Yes, she said. A subtle shift moved through the room. But, she added, I also believe that when you put yourself in a position to lead that change, you open yourself up to being questioned about it. Leonardo nodded slowly. That's fair. Another pause. And then something unexpected. Then let me ask you something else, he said. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. You've got a lot of questions today. A faint, almost tired smile crossed Leonardo's face. Because I don't think we ask each other enough of the right ones. The audience murmured softly. Leonardo's expression grew serious again. Do you think, he said, that sometimes the way we question people can discourage them from trying at all? That question hit differently. Because it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone watching. Whoopi leaned back slightly, considering it. I think, she said slowly, the way we question people can either challenge them or shut them down. And which do you think this is? Leonardo asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Because now, the conversation had turned back on itself. Whoopi didn't answer immediately. The audience waited. Sonny held her breath. Joy looked between them, wide-eyed. Finally, Whoopi spoke. I think, she began, then stopped. For the first time, she hesitated. And in that hesitation, something shifted. Not just in the conversation, but in the power dynamic itself. Because now, it wasn't just Leonardo being questioned. It was the conversation, the platform, the way these moments unfold in front of millions. And suddenly, everyone in that room realized this wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a reflection of fame, of responsibility, of how we hold people accountable, and how we listen when they answer. Leonardo leaned back slightly, the intensity still there, but now mixed with something else. Understanding. Maybe it's both, he said quietly. Whoopi looked at him. Maybe it challenges, he continued, and maybe sometimes it shuts down. A silence followed, but this one was different, less sharp, more thoughtful, and yet not resolved, because even though the edge had softened, the weight of everything said still lingered. And deep down, everyone could feel it. There was still one final moment coming, one final exchange, that would define everything that had happened on that stage. And as the cameras kept rolling, that moment moved closer. Slowly, inevitably, like the final scene of a story. No one would forget. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. For the first time since the interview began, the tension in the room wasn't sharp. It was heavy, reflective, like everyone was processing something deeper than just a debate. Leonardo DiCaprio sat back in his chair, his shoulders no longer tense in the same way. Not relaxed, but settled. Like he had said what he needed to say, even if it wasn't perfect. Across from him, Whoopi Goldberg adjusted her glasses slowly, her gaze no longer confrontational, but thoughtful. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. And somehow, that said everything. The audience, once reactive and restless, now sat in complete stillness. No whispers, no shifting, just attention, undivided and intense. Whoopi finally broke the silence. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, less edged with challenge, "this isn't the kind of conversation people expect to see here." A faint murmur of agreement passed through the audience. Leonardo gave a small nod. "Maybe that's why it matters." Whoopi looked at him for a long second. "And maybe," she added, "it's why people will have a lot to say about it." A slight ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd, but it was subdued, almost cautious. Because everyone knew this moment wasn't over when the cameras stopped. It was just beginning. Sunny Hostin leaned in, her tone carefully balanced. "I think what we're seeing here is what happens when two perspectives don't try to win, but try to understand." Joy Behar exhaled, shaking her head slightly. "Well, I don't know about you all, but I feel like we just went through something." A few audience members chuckled softly, but again, the laughter didn't break the mood. Because something had shifted. Not dramatically, not explosively, but quietly and permanently. Whoopi turned back to Leonardo. "I'm going to be honest with you," she said. Leonardo met her gaze. "I'd expect nothing less." A faint smile touched Whoopi's lips, but it disappeared just as quickly. "I pushed you today," she admitted. "You did, and I wasn't sure how you'd respond." Leonardo leaned forward slightly, his voice calm. "I wasn't sure either." That honesty drew a soft reaction from the audience. Whoopi nodded. "But I'll say this, you stayed in it." Leonardo didn't respond right away. "Because that meant something. And that matters," Whoopi added. A quiet wave of applause moved through the room. This time not divided, not hesitant, but unified. Leonardo gave a small, appreciative nod, but his expression remained thoughtful. "Can I say something?" he asked. Whoopi gestured with her hand. "Go ahead." Leonardo looked out at the audience now, really looked at them. Not as spectators, but as part of the moment. "I don't have all the answers," he said. The room stayed silent. "I never claimed to," he continued. "And I don't think anyone in my position should pretend they do." A few heads nodded. "But what I do believe," he added, "is that conversations like this, uncomfortable, imperfect, real, are part of how things move forward." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to, because every word landed. "And yeah," he said, glancing briefly back at Whoopi, "maybe sometimes they challenge, and sometimes they shut down." A faint, knowing reaction passed through the audience. "But maybe," he continued, "it's on all of us to make sure they do more of the first." Silence. Then, applause. Not loud at first, but growing. Steady. Real. Whoopi watched him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's fair," she said. And just like that, the confrontation ended. Not with a dramatic explosion. Not with a final sharp line. But with something far more powerful. Understanding. But the real story didn't stay in that studio. Within minutes of the episode airing, clips began circulating online. Short moments. Sharp exchanges. That one line, or maybe people in positions of influence could do more. Repeated, analyzed, debated. Social media lit up. Some viewers praised Leonardo for staying composed, for pushing back without losing control. Others sided with Whoopi, calling her questions necessary, overdue even. Headlines appeared almost instantly. Leonardo DiCaprio challenged live on air. Whoopi Goldberg presses Hollywood icon intense exchange. Was this the most honest moment on daytime TV? The internet did what it always does. It picked sides. It replayed every pause, every look, every word. And in doing so, it turned a conversation into a phenomenon. Backstage, sources would later say the energy lingered long after the cameras stopped. No shouting, no dramatic exits, just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows something meaningful, something unresolved, something real. And days later, people were still talking about it. Because it wasn't just about Leonardo DiCaprio or Whoopi Goldberg. It was about something bigger. How we question influence, how we respond to criticism, how we define authenticity in a world that's always watching. And maybe most importantly, how we listen. Now it's your turn. What did you think about this intense moment? Was Leonardo right to push back? Or did Whoopi ask the questions that needed to be asked? Drop your opinion in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more powerful, dramatic, and unforgettable stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Talk Battles, hit that like button, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Because conversations like this, they don't just stay on screen. They stay with you.